Thank you for your patience, and thank you to the organizers for the invitation today. Also, thank you for, of course, you for dropping by. 20 minutes about China, and mostly about what can I do for you. I'm here to share insight about my own 20 years journey in China. Not the whole full 20 years, in and out. But it's just to see what have I learned from my own travel and what do I observe. My background is the finance industry. I have my own financial company. So I look at China from an economic perspective, macro. I represent investors, so I also look at investment opportunities into China. And I'm basically an entrepreneur myself. 9 years ago, I founded my own company, and I have established very strong business relationships with Chinese counterparties. So the only thing for me here today is to share some insight about what have I seen. I'm not trying to sell you anything at all. And I hope we will have 20 interesting minutes together. I am sort of referring to to my presentation. Does it work? Do you see it at all? Okay. I'll do my best to explain what's on the presentation. Let's go straight into the startup scene in China. Very kind. Thank you. The heat is on in Berlin. Yeah, you're right. The entrepreneurial spirit in China is extreme. It's extreme strong. And as it was told in the introduction, it's pretty prestigious to be an entrepreneur or to work in an entrepreneurial company. 20 years ago, it was different. Everybody was searching into the so-called state-owned enterprises, and that is basically the very large state-controlled companies that we also know today. But during the past 20 years, it has really become very hot to become an entrepreneur and do the startup, try to hit the unicorn company and size. And on this presentation, on this slide, it shows the number of private venture capital funds in China. In 1995, there were 10 venture capital funds in China. In 2005, it was 500, and in 2015, it was 5,000 private venture capital funds in China. And actually, 2015 was what is mentioned as the capital spring in China. It was where everything boomed extremely, and that was the peak. And after that, there has been sort of a bit of a fade out, but the startup scene and the entrepreneurial scene is still booming. It's coming from maybe a mega boom to just a boom, but it's still going on. And about 10% of all people in China, they regard themselves somehow involved in a startup, or they have a plan to do so. Imagine if 8.5 million people in Germany were sort of see themselves as a startup or an entrepreneur. That would simply generate a certain force level of dynamic in the economy. That would be fantastic. And startups in China is everything. What we learn about, what we hear about is, of course, fintech, technology, AI, but small startups are also trendy. I think for a year ago, I was speaking with somebody in Beijing about sort of the current startup scene, what's going on, and that was to rent out dresses for parties via the internet and ship them as sort of with FedEx, not FedEx because that doesn't work in China, but at least with sort of a postal services, and then get them returned. So renting out dresses for parties, that was very hot for like 12 months ago. Another lady I met, she was looking into to collect used clothes in their neighborhood and sort of resell it. So startup is everything, and for you who can hang on. For you can see the screen, we have a guy up in the left corner, a very proud guy. This is also a startup in China. But, of course, we hear much more about all the fintechs and the technology companies. And this is where things are very interesting. In Beijing, in particular, in China, we all know about Silicon Valley. But I don't know if you have been in Beijing and visited the Chinese Silicon Valley, the Lundgreen. That is a fantastic place. If you ask the Chinese guys, they will say it is like Silicon Valley. It's just as big. It's not really. It is a half Silicon Valley, but a half Silicon Valley is fantastic big. And actually, 9,000 tech companies are right now hosted in this part of Beijing. It is a part of Beijing, and it is a bit an experience to go there. I don't know if any of you have been to the Garage Cafe in this area. And that is where young startup guys, tech guys, they meet. They rent a table. It is a cafe. You can go there, you can have a coffee or a water, and you can meet young startup people. And it's also where, here we are. It's also where you can buy a team. If you want to invest into a game developer, you buy a team. 5 years ago, the price of the team was $1 million. The year after, it was 2 million. And 2 years after, it was $4 million you had to place on the table to buy this team. They will develop a game. You, as an investor, get like 60% of the company. The founder, he gets like 30 or maybe 20, and the rest for the team. And this is how things work in China. It's very fast and very direct, and then you see if the game works or not. It's a fantastic startup scene. And can we engage with startup people in China? Yeah, that's a place to do it, actually. They'll probably think you might bring a suitcase fill up with US dollars, but it's not. But you can also speak with people, and you can engage, you can contact. And what is impressive about China compared to US is that it's faster. The startup scene is faster. It is even more advanced. The products that come out of China, also the tech products, the social media products, are much more advanced than what is originated from US. And that is, we are a fraction who tries to make a way of that. That it's a very good place to go to China to get some, just at least some, input, insight, and inspiration. And the inspiration is the speed and how big things can grow. I know China is an extremely big domestic market, and that supports the growth of many social media and apps. But what they do interesting in China is that there are extremely many startups that are sort of in a cluster around the big companies. So the big companies in China, the big tech companies, and they actually belong to the private sector, so to say. They attract a lot of startup companies and are engaged with startup people, and that is very interesting. And we could learn from that in Europe. And maybe as a startup, we can approach large companies a bit more aggressive in Europe. So that's another way how the Chinese guys are actually supporting startup people. China has become the global fintech leader, some say. I would say it takes a bit time yet. The thing and reason why China is the biggest fintech leader is some of the very large companies like Alibaba. They have founded some finance companies that are very large. But China is going there, and it will become the biggest fintech country in the world. But they have also a plan called Made in China 2025, and that is really worth to look into. If you look into the 10 bullets they have defined, I have split them up a bit and say some belongs more to the Silk Road project and some really belongs to what is interesting and looking forward when we talk about tech and artificial intelligence. These are what I call the strategic bullets. And if somebody knows the plan here in Germany called Wirtschaftsplan 4.0, you might recognize these 10 bullets because the Chinese premier, he has got his inspiration from the German Wirtschaftsplan 4.0. The only difference is that Angie is not really doing anything about these 10 bullets, but her mates in China, they are carrying out her plan. And this is where China wants to be the global leader. If you are interested in artificial intelligence, it is really worth to watch what they have now introduced for a few months ago. It's an area they call the new Greater Bay. That is sort of the inheritance of what was called the Pearl Delta. It is the area around Hong Kong, in particular Shenzhen. Shenzhen is the center of artificial intelligence in China. It's very big. It is fantastic moving. It's ambitious without any comparison in the world. And they are now generating the Greater Bay Area, that is Hong Kong, Shenzhen, actually also including Macau, and all the way around that bay. And that will be the future artificial intelligence center of the world, is my prediction. So if you have any interest there, it's worth to look at that. And then, could we get inspiration from that in Europe or in Germany? Yes, we could. If you look into the startup scene, what is needed? It is equity, it's capital, financing. You have all the great ideas, and we're all running for investors, yeah, and finding them, try to find them, try to grab them. The valley in Germany, I see, would be a combination of Hamburg and Berlin. In Hamburg is one of the most wealthiest places in whole Europe. There are truckloads of rich people, funds, there's capital, there is the infrastructure that is needed for startups, for commercial startups, and also including every kind of financing, also advisors, and you have great ideas here in Berlin. If I was these two large cities, I would combine efforts. That is how to beat and meet up with China. Just 2 minutes about what is fantastic and ever very interesting with China is how trends are moving. What was trendy for 24 months ago died out after 12 months. What is trendy 12 months ago is not trendy anymore. Things shift all the time. If you look into this chart, you'll just see how people in China are online shoppers. On the left-hand side, you can see Chinese clients are those who spend most of their salary online. And you can see the development on online shopping on the right-hand scale. If you look into absolute numbers, then the difference is not that big because, of course, the income in Germany is bigger than in China per head. But it's just how much time Chinese guys they spend online. They actually use 4 hours per day on their 40 apps on the mobile. This is fascinating again, and it's a market. It's a very difficult market to join and to enter, but there can be some ways in. Currently, we see, if we look into the fintech scene again, actually the robo-advisory of wealthy people that banks are introducing is growing big in China. I know one of the guys who is behind one of the biggest moves. In China, they introduce robo-advisory because the number of wealthy people are growing so fast that they can't find more people, more staff to advise these guys. In Europe, we introduce it to save money and to cost employees in the banking sector. The very next and big boom will be blockchain technology-based stuff. What is still outstanding, still to come, is all sort of chat technologies and services. So if some investors out there and they're looking for sort of a cheap way to come into the Chinese fintech scene, it's to invest into chatbot software. And then just a few names that made it. TikTok. I don't know if any of you are using TikTok, the video, sort of the Instagram version of videos. It was actually launched in 2016 and internationally in 2017. They have, their stuff has been downloaded 800 million now times. That's impressive. And other startups, they have like 100 or 200 million users. So if you have an app in China that needs to be successful, you will have maybe 50 million, as a 50 million users within 6 months to be very successful. So it's big numbers, big money, and that is very impressive. Here in Europe, less can do, absolute, and that is still impressive to see what happens in China. It gives you sort of a good boost going there, seeing there what's going on. That is what I have taken for sort of for my journey, and it's just my inspiration and to put on to you. It's where a lot of things going on, and that was basically the message. And I hope there will be a question to that. Yeah, come on, it's good.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Wing from Invest Hong Kong. I wonder, for a startup from Europe, would you recommend going to China directly or maybe take the route via Hong Kong?
Very good question. First of all, I'll recommend, if any has a dream about China, my own experience is to start up very early, 2-3 years ahead, getting to know people, and work the normal way, getting introduced to people. So if it's the investing wise, as I'm happy for Hong Kong in many ways to use Hong Kong. It's also where I have a huge network, but actually I've met very interesting people in China. In particular in Beijing, in the startup scene, and there are also ways to get the investment into China. That's sort of the second problem. But it's as a minority, it's investor, it's possible, and I would have no fear of doing so. But it takes time to learn people to know, and that's the most important thing. If anybody has a dream about China, start 3 years ahead with just getting around. I don't know if that's satisfactory for you. Will there be more questions? There was up in the back. Oh?
Thank you. My name is Max from SODPS, a startup. My question is regarding Chinese investor in European, German startups, for example, right? I know you are developing a lot of technology. How do the chances look like to attract a Chinese investor?
If you have a fantastic idea, you can have all the investors from China you'll have. Many of them like to take a minimum 60% stake right away. So they want your company. Are you ready? Secondly, a challenge is there can actually be, we do have different management styles, let's be honest. That it's not just, it can be you can get the highest price from a Chinese investor, but I can tell you the demands are up there. Expectations are very high, and there's a problem that there have been very large returns on private equity investments in China. And there are still some in China who sort of dreams about the high internal return rates, and we can't deliver that in Europe. Yeah, if we have the best idea in the world, we can. But I would say that there will be some pressure. I have seen companies getting Chinese investors on board that they have sort of searched for. There is They're just a different view on the world and how fast and how much you work maybe, and how much you need to deliver. But if you're ready, you they're out there, yeah. Is that for you okay? Good. Will that be it?
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Peter.
My pleasure.
Thank you.